What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and today I'm going to be ranking, according to my favorite, the Led Zeppelin albums. This has been on my list pretty much since I started doing non-Zappa things. It's been on the short list, but I've just never gotten around to it because I have nothing to add to the Led Zeppelin conversation. I recently made a video about another band and just used Led Zeppelin as a reference point, as if like, hey, you guys all know what water tastes like. They're like water. And I used Led Zeppelin. It's just like, you know what Led Zeppelin's like, because if you know music, Led Zeppelin, people, Led Zeppelin. What else am I going to say? I think out of every single band I've done, and I'm trying to think of bands out there, maybe in some weird subgenre this exists, but I can't think of a band whose catalog from album 1 all the way to album 9. I'm including Coda on this list, even though that was, a post sort of archival releasing. I'm going to include it because there's only 9 albums. They didn't make a bad album. There's one of them, which I'm sure we could argue about, that, people think is not a good Led Zeppelin album. And it might not be a good Led Zeppelin album, the one that's going to be first on my list, but it's not a bad album. It's actually could be a good Robert Plant solo album, in fact. But I don't think it's a necessarily bad album. By far the weakest in the catalog, but 1 through 7, wow. I mean, that is a run of historic proportions, epic proportions. I recently talked about in the Kings video how there are great bands, and then the greatest of great bands have, someone argued, have 5 album runs where they have 5 consecutive great albums. Zeppelin has a 6 album run. 1 through 6, I would put all on that upper echelon tier. Fantastic band. Don't listen to it much anymore. I think by the time I graduated from high school, I knew every note to the first 8, everything, even Coda probably. So they're not something I have to go back and revisit very often, just because I feel like I played them out. But I did revisit them recently. I've been listening to them, kind of knowing I wanted to get this video out of the way. And they're just good, man. They're just good. It's just a great band. I mean, what else can I say? They are deserving of the praise. So yeah, that's it. I'm going to rank them. My favorite. You tell me what your favorites are. Blah, blah, blah. You know how this works. How did we get here from Zappa? Lots of ways. Going all the way back to the early 7s. Flo and Eddie. Robert Planet references in the sort of groupie routine. We got a nice Whole Lot of Love jam in the Leather era from like a Winter 77 show. We got Stairway to Heaven. They just flat out covered Stairway to Heaven. 2 live versions of that have been released. If you haven't heard them, check them out on The Best Band You've Never Heard in Your Life and the last US show, Zap 88. Frank knew of Zappa. Apparently Robert Plant was at one of the shows, which is why at the end of the Stairway to Heaven on the Best Band, you hear him give a shout out to Robert. Apparently that was Robert Plant. But anyways, that's it. Here we go. 9 albums. I'm including Coda, which was sort of an archival after they broke up release, but it's not their worst. So let's get on to number 9. My number 9 is their 8th and officially last actual studio album as a band, In Through the Outdoor. This was the first album I ever bought from Led Zeppelin. I saw it on cassette. I'm pretty sure it was either used or reduced price in Music Market in Costa Mesa. I went back and listened to it like crazy. And one of the reasons I never got around to buying other Led Zeppelin albums first is I remember going to the record store, or a friend of mine had, I think, with Led Zeppelin IV. And the first time I listened to it, I realized I knew 7 of the songs just by listening to them on the radio. Zeppelin was all over the radio, every track. On Led Zeppelin IV, I knew everything but 4 Sticks. On Houses of the Holy, I thought I knew everything but the crunge. But then when I heard the crunge, I was like, oh, I know this song too. I knew half of Physical Graffiti, half of 2, half of 1. They played Zeppelin deep cuts on LA radio all the time. So it was a band that I came around to late as far as buying albums, because I knew all the songs, right? And I love them, but I could turn on the radio and wait 30 minutes and I would hear a Zeppelin song, almost guaranteed. And with two channels that were competing, you can just go back and forth and listen to Zeppelin all day. It felt like. So when I bought this one, that was the first one I bought. I think it must have been sometime in junior high. And then after that, I started slowly picking them up slowly over the years. I don't think it's a bad album. I think it's actually kind of a good Robert Plant solo album. So it might be a bad Zeppelin album, but I think it's a pretty good Robert Plant solo album, especially the last two songs, All My Love, radio hit. I still think that's a great song. Listening to this album recently, I'm not a huge fan of everything before it. There's a couple songs I like, but when All My Love drops, the second song on side 2, it is just like, this is the moment I've been waiting for. And it sounds really good when you've listened to the first 5 songs. And then the final, I'm Gonna Crawl, which is like a Robert Plant-ish slow ballad with some nice bombastic energy, a nice sort of build throughout it. A really good album ender. I think the album ends with the strongest 2 songs. The opening, In the Evening, is kind of a B version of like a Physical Graffiti epic. You know, it's got a really good like a really good just kind of riff that dominates. Some good sort of lengthier, slightly proggy energy, but it's like you have Physical Graffiti up here and those sort of epic jams, and then In the Evening, kind of a step below. Even a step below like Presence's Achilles' Last Stand. So they're trying. It's probably the one song that sounds the most Zeppelin on this album, by far, but B-grade Zeppelin. South Bend Suarez, kind of a little upbeat, funky piano-driven number that I want to like, but it just doesn't do much for me. Fool in the Rain, I love. Love the drum work on Fool in the Rain. I just love the energy of this song. Another big radio hit. I have no issues with this. Hot Dog, a silly little throwaway number. Carouselambra. Do not like the keyboard sounds in this. They're going for a very heavy keyboard, proggy sound. Bad choice in sounds. There are some interesting grooves that drop throughout the 10.5 minutes. But overall, I just don't think it works very well. And then the fantastic All My Love and I'm Gonna Crawl, which I think are really good. Do they sound like Zeppelin numbers? No. Are they good songs? Yes. So a good album, not a good Zeppelin album. My number 9, In Through the Outdoor. Number 8 is the album released after they broke up, sort of a culling of the archives to sort of take advantage of, capitalize on them before, interest maybe died. I think the reason this was released was because somebody was sitting on the live version of I Can't Quit You Baby that's on this. And this was before, the digital age or the CD age when you had like releases with a bunch of bonus tracks. And somebody was like, I have to get this I Can't Quit You Baby out to the public. So we need another album. Find me a bunch of stuff we can put around it. Third song, side A, live version of I Can't Quit You Baby from 70. Doesn't sound live. They purposely, I think, mixed all the crowd noise out. It is just blistering blues, fire. It is essential listening. It makes this entire album worth it. And I think the pacing of the album for being something that is pretty much in sequential order or chronological order from the time it was recorded on, for the most part, it just works. I don't know. I like the album. I don't think it's bad. We're Gonna Groove, live song, opens up the album again. The live audience noise is sort of mixed out of it. Just a nice, good, sort of easy rocker. I think it's a cover of like a Benny King song or something. There's an outtake from the Zeppelin III sessions, Poor Tom, which I think would have worked perfectly well on Zeppelin III. Maybe not as good as that stuff, but it has that energy, and so you get kind of a nice straight rocker followed by like a country-ish, more countrified rocker, and then that goes into that just blistering I Can't Quit You Baby, which is kind of like essential listening, I would think. Then you get Walter's Walk, which is from the Houses of the Holy session. Kind of sounds like it would belong on Houses of the Holy. I could see why it didn't make the cut, but it definitely has that vibe. You have the awesomely poppy, the pop rock Ozone Baby, which at time reminds me of like ELO maybe, or I don't know. There's something about it that just maybe a Cheap Trick song, but it's definitely a little more pop rock, but I like it. I think it works. Plant's got a good voice for this kind of stuff. You get Darlene, which has some really fun rock energy. I think Darlene is the one where you get a pink carnation in a pickup truck American Pie reference. It's also a song that kind of has some Southbound Suarez energy, where I think if Darlene had been on In Through the Outdoor and sounded Southbound Suarez, I think that may have been a slightly better album. The only song I really don't like is Bonzo's Montreux, which is just like a drum, so not really a drum solo, but like a written drum part that features a bunch of drums, and it just doesn't do much for me. Like 4.5 minutes of drumming. It doesn't do much for me. And then the closing, Wearing and Tearing, which was sort of their attempt to be a little more punk, maybe a little more ragged, a little more not heavy lumbering hard rock, but sort of light on its feet, attacking that kind of more like punkish hard rock. And I think it works. Like I have no problem. The only song I really don't like is Bonzo's Montreux. Everything else on this album is completely listenable. Do not overlook this album. I think it is a good album. And I Can't Quit You, Baby, that Willie Dixon cover, you have to hear it because it is amazing. But that's my number 8, Coda. Number 7 is Presence, their 7th album. Really, really solid, almost like a little more, I don't know what it is. Just feels a little more straightforward rock, like a little bit of the experimentation that they were doing with Physical Graffiti and Houses of the Holy. Maybe not necessarily experimentation, but the more acoustic stuff, the keyboard stuff. We're back to more just kind of straightforward hard rock with a little bit of more of like a Physical Graffiti, lengthier type energy going into the songs. I guess all their albums have long songs, but there's like a Physical Graffiti size that some of these songs have. The opening, Achilles' Last Stand, has just some really nice thundering energy to it. One of the nice long 10-minute number, just one of those just 10 minutes of galloping hard rock energy. Yeah, I don't know. The title, Achilles' Last Stand, fits perfectly with the way the music sounds. For Your Life, the second song, and then Candy Store Rock, the second song on side B. The only two songs I think are a little more generic and maybe just kind of placeholders. Good stuff amongst great stuff. Royal Orleans is the third song. A short little, really effective sort of like, I don't know, punch in the gut type rock number. Side 2 opens up with the awesome Nobody's Fault But Mine. Completely different sort of take on this than the Grateful Dead's sort of slower, more like, lonely, moaning, like it's nobody's fault but mine, kind of woe is me. This is just a really aggressive, just really attacking, some great vocals by Robert Plant, just like really digging into the song and really enjoying it. Candy Store Rock, again, kind of a throwaway number. But then Hot's On For Nowhere, some really good start-stop. Like, there's a really weird version of, like, I guess, Led Zeppelin funk on here. Just a lot of songs that have this really, like, start-stop energy where it's just not one continuous groove, but these rhythmic patterns that have, like, all these little interesting little breaks in them, stuff like that. Hot's On For Nowhere is one of those. And then T for One, like the close to 10-minute closer, starts off with a little more upbeat, like rock riffing stuff, and then drops into this nice kind of slower, more atmospheric blues vibe that kind of just builds and builds and builds and then goes other places over the course of 9 minutes. But just some really, really interesting songs on here, some really good ideas. Yeah, I think there's only 2 songs that I would say are kind of average, and everything else is pretty good. Definitely not as epic as every other album they put out, the first 6, but it's not that big of a disappointment. And it's one of those, I have to admit, I probably listen to a little more often these days than the others. If I go back to listen to them, I'm usually listening to Physical Graffiti or this, just because these are the songs that weren't all over the radio at all. I think the only one I had ever heard on the radio was Hot's On For Nowhere. But yeah, it's a good album. Number 7, Presence. Number 6 is Led Zeppelin III. At this point, these top 6 are all perfect albums. Like, what, this is all just personal preference. If you think this is number 1, yeah, I don't blame you. It's a great album. Opens up with Immigrant Song. If you've seen a Marvel movie, I'm sure you've heard Immigrant Song. I think it's in Thor, right? Dark World, maybe? Or Ragnarok. I think it opens Ragnarok. Just one of those songs that's become sort of the pop culture, like, musical, everybody knows immigrant song, right? Friends is great. Celebration Day. Since I've Been Loving You, probably one of my favorite slow burning Zeppelin blues numbers. Just that middle, there's a sort of repeated little lick that like kind of dominates this little motif that is just dun 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 dun. Oh, just almost chilling and haunting. Out on the Tiles and Side A, a little more kind of upbeat rock energy. And then we get the acoustic, all over the map acoustically, like different vibes, fun, Side B, Gallows Pole. You got to take me to the Gallows Pole, a little more upbeat. Gallows Pole and what is it? Brawn Your Stomp. I think those are the two that I seem to be like, half of the White Stripes catalog is based on those two songs. I imagine this must be a favorite album of Jack White. Tangerine, nice little kind of more poppier type acoustic number. That's the Way, a beautiful, slower, almost ballady, kind of introspective, emotional one. Brawn Your Stomp, and then the Hats Off to Roy Harper to close. Just an absolutely fantastic album. Sort of, I don't want to say the softer side of them, because other than That's the Way, the acoustic energy is used for just a lot of good stuff. But they're trying to be a little bit different. They're trying to like veer out of a straight just hard rock blues, and it works. They're fantastic. Like Robert Plant's voice, everything. It's an incredible band. There's nothing I could add to them. But yeah, it's my sixth favorite. Sixth favorite, Led Zeppelin III. My number 5 is Led Zeppelin II. Something's got to go at 5, right? My main reason is I've never been the biggest fan of Whole Lotta Love. I respect the riff. When I listen to it, I enjoy it, but it has never been my favorite. It was never my favorite of their songs. And I do think part of the reason of that is, other than Stairway to Heaven, probably even more than Stairway to Heaven, it is the song I think that I've heard on the radio more than any other Zeppelin song. I would say by far. Probably more than Stairway to Heaven, because Stairway to Heaven is like 2 of these, so people would probably play this more often. So at that point, I think I'm just kind of tired of it. But I had to find a reason to put this at number 5, so that's why I put it at number 5. What Is and What Should Never Be has nice dynamic stuff. I'll take any song that has a dun-dun, little jam breakdown in the middle. I'm always up for that. The Lemon Song, just an all over the map, crazy sort of blues, working homage, twisted, just Led Zeppelin doing what Led Zeppelin does so incredibly well. Thank You, beautiful little ballad. Just awesome. Yeah, some great John Paul Jones keyboard work. Phenomenal little track. You get the side 2, the great Heartbreaker into Living, Loving, Made. She's Just a Woman. Heartbreaker, one of the classic Jimmy Page riffs. There was a DJ, don't know which radio station it was in LA, either KMET or KLOS. One DJ only who would play Heartbreaker and would not play Livin', Lovin', Made afterwards. And man, that always got me, because I always thought that was the same song for years, and when he didn't play it, I was like, why did he stop that song midway through? And then I got the album and realized it was 2 separate songs. But if you heard Heartbreaker on the radio, 99% of the time, unless it was that one DJ in LA, you were going to hear Livin', Lovin', Made afterwards. Ramble On, great little acoustic number. Moby Dick, nice little opening riff, but then we go into a lengthy, kind of really subdued little drum solo. Not my favorite thing. And then Bring It On Home, which is just another hard rock and blues-based sort of hard rock classic. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with this album for me, other than one song I've heard way too much, and I'm not really a fan of middle of the album drum solos. But yeah, a great album. My number 5, their number 2, Led Zeppelin II. My number 4 is their number 1, Led Zeppelin Run. 1. Yeah, what? There's nothing wrong with these albums. Good Times, Bad Times, opening. What a great opener. Never heard of this band. You put the needle on the album and that's what you hear first. Man, I'm going to be a fan for life had that been the case. I wasn't alive yet, though. Babe, I'm Going to Leave You. Just another fantastic vocal performance. Just not necessarily a softer side, but showing that like a hard rock band could do ballads and still like just blow you away. You Shook Me. Absolutely stunning version of this. Again, I think I said this when I made the Jeff Beck video, because he does a version of You Shook Me on one of his early albums, and Stewart sings it, Rod Stewart. I'm like, Once I heard the Zeppelin version, I'm sorry, just nobody else can compare to what Robert Plant does to that song. Dazed and Confused, an outright classic, one of the best hard rock songs of all time. Your Time Is Gonna Come. The trio of songs from Your Time Is Gonna Come to Black Mountainside, dropping immediately into Communication Breakdown is one of my favorite 3-song runs in the entire Zeppelin catalog. The Your Time Is Gonna Come sort of like, I don't know, your time, just like singing to the odd, almost preaching to the choir, just this heavenly type vibe, like this hard rock band doing that, then going into that acoustic Black Mountainside, and then dropping into the utterly just like Communication Breakdown, which is like a relentless 2.5 minutes. Just over the course of those 3 songs, they show off so many different things. Phenomenal. And awesome, I Can't Quit You, Baby, that sadly, if you've heard that Coda one, this one's going to sound not quite as epic. And then How Many More Times to close out a nice long 8+ minute bluesy jam to just close things out. Yeah, another perfect album. What can I say? Something has to be number 4, so I put this in number 4 for reasons I really can't think of. But that's my number 4, Led Zeppelin I. My number 3 is Led Zeppelin IV. This is a near perfect album, right? I would say I've heard Black Dog too many times in my life. I've heard rock and roll too many times in my life. I've heard Stairway to Heaven too many times in my life. And so I recognize those are great songs. And when I'm listening to them, I'm like, yeah. Like, listen to Bonham's drumming, listen to the bass playing, listen to the guitar playing, Plant can sing. Like, I recognize the greatness. And when I went to revisit these, I have to admit, Black Dog and rock and roll, I was like, okay. But then we get to Battle of Evermore. I absolutely love that. Sandy Denny's vocals and the join in Robert Plant, beautiful. Stairway to Heaven, in the sequencing of those songs, it arriving as the final song on side A, the 4th song of the album, works perfectly. Misty Mountain Hop, I will never get tired of listening to Misty Mountain Hop. 4 Sticks, Going to California, both great songs. As someone who's from California, I've lived in Texas for decades, but I still consider myself a Californian. I love Going to California. That's just a great, it works. It's a great vibe. And then their greatest song, maybe one of their greatest songs, another thing that's absolutely near perfect with some of the best drumming in the world, some of the best everything in the world, When the Levee Breaks. I got nothing else to say about When the Levee Breaks other than all hail, all bow down to the power, to the majesty, to the oomph, to the Led Zeppelin-ness of When the Levee Breaks. The vocal performance, the guitar, the bass, but those drums, people, those drums. Yeah. This probably should be higher, but this is a ranking of my favorites. And I don't listen to this album all that much just because of that side A I've heard way too many times. But 4 is another perfect album. And that's my number 3, Led Zeppelin IV. So. Number 2 is Houses of the Holy. 2 of my favorite Zeppelin songs are on here. The softer, more delicate, acoustic-y, sort of just like, I don't even know how to describe it, beautiful, The Rain song. I was driving after a Dead show. We went to see the Dead somewhere in Southern California, and we hung out afterwards. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning when we decided to drive back up to Berkeley. And everybody else in the car was asleep. I was listening to this album, and the sun, you're driving north, so the sun's coming up in the east, and the sun started to come up about, like literally started to break the horizon about a minute into Rain song. And it was just one of the most epically beautiful next 5-minute drive of my life. Nothing could have been more perfect. I will remember that moment the rest of my life. It was fantastic. I also absolutely love No Quarter, the eeriness of it, John Paul Jones's keyboard work, just everything about No Quarter is just, that is a song I have never gotten sick of listening to ever. And everything else on this album is fantastic. The song remains the same, really like longer, epic guitar heavy type song that sort of is the best version, I think, of Achilles' Last Stand and In the Evening. That's sort of just like over the top, layer down those guitars and just kind of rock out for 6.5, 5.5, 6 minutes. The Rain Song, Over the Hills and Far Away, radio classic, that amazing guitar intro, and then we get that sort of hard break at that break, then we go into the harder part at the end. The Crunge, the funkiest number they ever dropped, with one of the best endings. Plant's vocals are weird, really weird little sort of really weird hard rock funk with that awesome ending where, where's the bridge? Where's the bridge? Can somebody show me that confounded bridge? Because the song has no bridge. Musically. Dancing Days, just that awesome awesome lick. Dire Maker, Jamaica. It's a song about Jamaica. Hold Steady reference. Yeah, I like this song. They're being a little more playful. I like it. I'm a fan of it. The amazing No Quarter, and then The Ocean. Dun 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 dun. I mean, everything about this song is just fantastic also. Like, how many of these songs are like, how many bands would like to have one of these songs, let alone an entire album of these songs? But this, like the one that is next, like the one that preceded it on this list, are very dynamic. Like, you have a lot going on. You got some weird funk, you got some slower stuff, you got some beautiful stuff, you got some keyboard work, you got a little bit of everything. And I think that's why I go back to them a little bit more, is that diversity I've come to appreciate more over the years. But yeah, that's my number 2, Houses of the Holy. And my favorite, Physical Graffiti. I'm a sucker for double albums. This is a double album. Nothing bad about this at all. Side A and B, disc 1, as it's now in the CD world, is just home run after 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 home run. You get their, sort of riff-driven hard rock. You get a slower bluesy number. You get Kashmir, where they're bringing in Middle Eastern influences. You get these sort of Misty Mountain hop-ish trampled underfoot. Yeah, you just get a little bit of like all their hard rock flavors, and everybody sounds fantastic, and it sounds bigger than life, and there is absolutely nothing to complain about on the first 2 sides of this. There's nothing to complain about on the second 2 sides of this. The slow burning intro-y, like In the Light, where they're starting to get a little more dramatic and taking time to use the studio and develop ideas even more so than they had before. Brawny-Yor, Down by the Seaside, which you feel like you're down by the seaside. Like, I can feel the seaside, the cold English seaside where the sun's out, but you're still not that warm, but you feel it. The awesome 10 Years Gone, Night Flight, a little poppier type number. The Wanton Song, great, absolute great riff that the sensational Alex Harvey Band ripped off. Boogie with Stu. The song's groove is in the title. Black Country Woman, which almost has a Rolling Stones sort of Exile on Main Street, sort of like that type of like country-ish vibe. And then Sick Again to close out. Just nothing wrong with this album. Yes, side 1 and side 2, I think side A blows. It's near perfect. And so side 3 and 4 are necessarily going to maybe feel a little less epic. And I do think that had you sequenced this album differently, Led Zeppelin, it would be absolutely perfect. Just because there are so many heavy hitters on those first 2 sides. But then you have things like In the Light, you have 10 Years Gone, you have the Wanton Song, you have a Black Country Woman, even the sort of Night Flight vibe. Yeah, you have so many things on here that just like lift it up. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with this album. It's perfect. It is the one that when I go back and listen to an album, I listen to it way more often than the others, and Presence, like I said, because those are the ones I'm less familiar with. And I listen to side 2 of this a lot. I do think it's really good, but I understand that in sort of the shadow of sides 1 and 2, it just, yeah. I mean, it's a great album. Yeah, I'm really not complaining at all about this. I'm just trying to find reasons to like not call their last 6 albums just absolute perfect creations. Trying to just have a little bit of an opinion other than to just bow down at the altar of Led Zeppelin. But yeah, that's my number 1, Physical Graffiti. So yeah, that's my list. Like, as long as you don't have In Through the Outdoors number 1, I respect every list that I could possibly see. Again, I think this band is just untouchable. Like, you might not like them. You might not be able to listen to them anymore, but they didn't make any mistakes. Like, this is perfect music. This band is amazing. I mean, The world is lucky that these four people got together and made music together. We all benefit from it. Most of the hard rock bands or metal bands or bands probably are influenced by this band at some point. And I've heard complaints about like, how they ripped off just blues artists and they took what blues artists were doing and like made money off it. And it reminds me of a quote that I heard Keith Richards said once. The first tour that the Rolling Stones did back in the States back in the 60s, they expected to meet an American audience that was going to be upset with them for doing their blues music, taking our American blues artists and covering their songs and performing them. And like the Rolling Stones came over with the idea, like, we want to make sure we pay tribute to them. Like, we're going to invite them on the tour. We're going to give them a space. We're going to bring them on TV with us. And then they got here and realized that Americans didn't know their own blues music, and they all thought these songs were originals, and they had no idea that the Stones were covering American artists. So anytime I hear somebody complain about Led Zeppelin doing the blues, I'm like, yeah, but Americans weren't listening or buying that music. So at least somebody brought them an audience. And I know I personally started to listen to Willie Dixon because of Led Zeppelin. So that is at least one door that was open. And I'm sure a lot more people did that. So I have nothing but much, all my love for this band. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got to say. Let me know what you think about Led Zeppelin, your list of albums, all that stuff. Subscribe, like, comment, share, and go listen to music, people. Go listen to that live version, I Can't Quit You Baby on Coda, because that thing is a masterpiece. Talk to you later. Peace.